Let's do some setup work and some refinement. I've got some big time-consuming projects on the go, which you'll see in coming weeks, so we'll do some maybe less adventurous stuff today. Up first we have a Ripper bass. This particular one came off the line on August the 9th, 1978, old Kalamazoo, Michigan. In the Billboard Top 10 that week we find the Rolling Stones with Miss You. The Commodores were doing well with Once, Twice, Three Times a Lady. Donna Summer was there as well with Last Dance. On the hard rock side of things, we've got Foreigner with Hot Blooded, Check It and See. I'm not sure if any of those was recorded on a Ripper. Those of you who have been around for a while will remember I did some work on a Grabber bass back near the beginning of the year, which is the sibling instrument to this one. They came out at the same time. They're two halves of one equation. The Grabber has the movable pickup, where the Ripper has two humbuckers. This was designed by Bill Lawrence. Not just the pickups, he designed the whole instrument actually. These were produced between 1973 and 83, a span of time that includes most of your classic funk and disco eras. These were a little more popular with the rock and roll crowd though. Rick Danko from the band had one, as did Peter Cetera from Chicago, Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and of course the bong-rattling bass of Mel Shocker of Grand Funk Railroad was Ripper, as observed by noted musicologist Homer Simpson. This one just needs a bit of something. The owner's former partner introduced it to a flight of stairs, and it hasn't been quite right since. It actually got off extremely light. You know, the headstock is just fine. This is, of course, the era with a great big volute. I don't think that's what saved the bass. There's a bit of an annoying harmonic buzz coming from the headstock somewhere that we need to track down, and it needs a bit of a setup. This can be something of a complex equation because this one gets tuned down to C standard, and sometimes I'm told down to B. That's practically subsonic, and you tune a bass to B, and the strings can vibrate in this massive arc because they're just so loose, you know? So sometimes there needs to be a little bit of extra relief in the neck, or with a straight neck, you need pretty tall action to make that work because the strings are just flopping. There's a balance to be had between the two. But you can also end up in a situation, that sort of odd condition where the end of the fretboard is rising in relation to the strings because it's at the end of a curve, and you can have notes fretting out and stuff. So let's check this out and see what's happening. So this is the thing. The owner was trying to record with it, and this is just bugging them to no end. Sounds like one of those springy door stops. Relief on the neck here is over 25 thousandths, which I would consider extreme in most cases, but again, it's a funny system. Not getting anything out of my tuner. This could be an issue. The little chicken head there is kind of flopping around like a chicken without a head. And also the jack feels quite loose as well. Let's plug it in. And everything's turned up. I'm not getting anything. Nothing at all. Oh, and the action on this, measured at the 12th fret, is 9/64ths, bass and treble, which is kind of extreme. To be honest, it doesn't feel that bad to play since the strings are so slack, but it's still got to come down a bit. Let's shoot for like 6. I'm going to start with a quick tighten of things that could be loose. And the truss rod is not particularly loose. It's not that tight. Give that a shot and see what happens. I've isolated the annoying buzz to the second string tuner. Stringing these basses can be a bit confusing, if I remember correctly. This is, I think it's a 34.5-inch scale length, but you have to remember there's an extra, because it's a string through body, there's like an extra 1.5 inches after length to the string. So short scales strings definitely won't work, but depending on the brand, I don't think even some long scale, you might need super long. There might not be enough full width wrap on the string towards the peg head end. So the owner has brought me some super longs. We'll see if that works. I'll look for any obvious breaks or shorting. What's that? Someone else has been in here with a soldering iron. I see insulation that's burned. There we go. There. The sheer amount of extra wire tornadoing its way around the switch is kind of funny. It's almost like they knew it was going to come loose at some point, so they might add some extra to give you some wiggle room. Because someone is probably going to want to know what this is. This thing that looks like a couple of little spools of thread or a tiny little power generator. This is a choke coil, and it's basically an inductor. Electricity goes in and it sets up a little magnetic field that works like a phase canceller. It's a filter on alternating current. Basically, direct current, DC, passes right through it, but the AC gets hung up and filtered out. So this cuts out unwanted frequencies and a certain amount of noise. This doesn't look like the first time this wire has come undone, so let's do it right. I'm going to suck off some of this old offending solder. Okay, plugged it in. Let's test it out. There's another one here. And there is a lug without a wire. So I think we can assume that one goes here. Maybe? Or is it the other way around? Maybe I can find a picture online. I did find a picture online. Several, actually. The thing is, many of these seem to have had their pots replaced. Originally, they used these little square plastic cube-like pots, which apparently didn't hold up very well. It's a Norlin era kind of idea. But they switched to these more standard ones at some point. Also, it seems like a lot of them have had wires come loose. I see evidence of fresh solder on several connections, including both the wires that were disconnected when I opened it up. But that seems to be the par for the course for all of the pictures online. For all of those who complain that nothing ever goes wrong in my videos, I was unsoldering the remnants of the previous wire, and I wasn't filming it because I figured I had just shown you the other side, and the little tab came right off. So I've carved back a little bit of the insulating material, exposing the brass that went in and under it, and fashioned a new little lug for myself to wire to. Things happen. This is on there good and firmly. And now we have sound, finally. Let's prevent this from happening again. It actually does have a spiked washer on it. It was just too loose to function. Even basses deserve to have their frets polished. Zoomed in really close here on the buzzy tuner. This is the issue. barrel here, there's a little tiny bit of play between these parts. This has become loose. And first thing I'm going to try is just squeezing this tighter. See if we can lock that down. I've got my soft jaw pliers here. We'll see if I can get in with those. And give it a good firm squeeze. Not enough. I suspect this tuner took the brunt of the fall down the stairs, because not only is this loose, there's a little bit of a bend in the shaft where it meets the bearing surface. It's got to come off. I'll use a bit more mechanical advantage. It's funny, I think there's still a little bit of a wiggle in there. I'll work down at the end here. I think that might have it. No, there's still a little bit of slop in that. I'm going to have to put a little bit of super glue in that. Not so much for the adhesive effect, but just to kind of take up the space. I'm going to intonate this for C. It looks like it's been fooled with, but not in a good way. So the top string is flat considerably. Third string's very close. That's weird. C is bang on the money. Ordinarily, we wouldn't expect to see the saddle for the lower string so much farther forward than the preceding ones. However, there can be some deceptive things going on in terms of string diameter versus the actual core size. Sometimes the wraps over top of them might be less massive, but still giving you more volume. So it's possible that the inner core on these strings is actually thicker than on the low C, which can affect the intonation. It's again, I mean, if it works, it works. So this top string, which I guess is, what would it be, E flat, it's playing flat. So that means that the saddle has to move forward towards the headstock. I think of it as flat forward. Still flat. Needs to move farther forward. That's got it. Okay, this has now been set up with around 12 thousandths relief. And we're still just a bit high. So we'll lower the action at the bridge. I'm just going to set the pickup height to start off with. I want about 1/8 of an inch worth of clearance. Just over 3 millimeters. That's to start off with. We'll see how it sounds when it's plugged in, but that'll sort of get us in the ballpark. You'll note that I'm taking that measurement with the strings held down at the last fret, between the pull piece and the underside of the string. Okay, now, the control setup for these is not going to be very intuitive for most people, if they happen to find one at a pawn shop or something, because this is not a simple pickup selector switch in the usual vein. These are tone-specific settings that are designed to work in conjunction with the knobs, also at certain settings. Other things, well, for instance, if you want to play the neck pickup in this bass alone, you can't. Not going to happen. Not available. Not with stock wiring. So the knobs are fairly simple, though. It's master volume, a mid-range cut, and then a master tone. But the chicken head knob gives you, in position 1, both pickups in phase, wired in series. That gives you some bite. The position 2 is the bridge pickup alone, which is obviously going to give you a little more treble. Position 3 is both pickups in phase, wired in parallel, which is, a bit more oomph, a bit more bottom heavy. Position 4 is both pickups out of phase, wired in series. That makes it a little more dirty when he wants to bring the funk. None of this comes through in my pathetic little amp, which is not designed for bass, but this is how it's supposed to be. So, there are lots of interesting tones available, but you have to kind of search for them and then somehow remember where they are. Gibson actually put out a promotional record back in 1974, which featured a couple of bassists showcasing some of these tones and explaining how to get them. There's a great site, flyguitars.com, that has a bunch of info on Gibson basses in general, including this one. They have uploaded the audio from that 45, and I'll put a link in the description if you want to listen to it. That said, I am not much of a bassist, and not having a bass amp, I'll just, plug in and rattle all the tools in the shop here for your amusement.